Julio was just a boy of 14 years old, but he didn't have a home, he didn't have a bed, and most days he didn't even have food. He lived on the streets of a big, noisy city, of Abuja. He wore the same clothes every day, torn, dirty, and old. His feet were always bare. To survive, Julio picked bottles and pieces of scrap metal from the dustbins. He placed them in a large sack, hoping to sell them for a few coins. Sometimes he got lucky. A kind man would give him 5 naira. Other times people would shout at him, "Go away! You're dirty! You're making the market smell!" But Julio never gave up. Even when his stomach made loud sounds, even when he hadn't eaten all day. That morning the sun rose, hot and bright. Julio woke up early from the cold pavement where he had slept. His back ached, his lips were dry, his belly had been empty since the day before. He picked up his old sack, the one he used to collect bottles and scrap metal, and began to walk, slowly. His legs felt weak. Julio walked through the dusty streets, searching the gutters and rubbish piles. He found 2 crushed bottles, 1 bent spoon, and a few metal cans. He smiled a little and dropped them into his sack. "Maybe today I'll get enough coins to buy food," he whispered to himself. Soon he reached the market. The market was full of noise. Women shouted prices. Men pushed carts, children ran with pieces of bread in their hands. Julio walked to the first stall and said gently, "Auntie, please, do you have some food you're not using?" The woman turned quickly. "Go away! You think I cook for beggars?" she snapped. He stepped back quietly and walked to the next woman, selling tomatoes, a little bread. "Auntie, even the crumbs?" he asked. She ignored him completely, like he didn't exist. Julio walked stall after stall. Nobody looked at him. Some waved him away with anger. Others just turned their heads. His stomach hurt. His eyes burned. But he didn't cry. Then he saw a small group of boys eating roasted corn near a banana stall. One boy dropped a piece of food on the ground and didn't pick it up. Julio waited until they walked away. Then he slowly bent down and picked the piece, wiping the dust with his shirt. He didn't care what it was. His belly needed something. But before he could eat it, a dog ran past and grabbed it from his hand. Julio sat down under the wooden stall in silence, his arms wrapped around his knees. He tried to stay calm. "Maybe the trash will feed me today," he said softly. He got up again and walked behind a nearby restaurant where food waste was thrown every day. The smell was strong. The flies were many. But to Julio, this was hope. He dug through the trash carefully, lifting lids and checking plates. Finally, he found it, a small bowl of rice and beans, not too dirty, not too spoiled. His heart jumped. "Thank you, God," he whispered. He took the bowl, washed it quickly with water from a leaking pipe, and sat under a small tree beside the dumpster. He placed his sack down, unwrapped the rice with shaky hands, and smiled. This was his first meal in 2 days. He lifted a spoonful to his mouth, but just then he heard a sound behind the dumpster, a quiet thud, like someone had fallen. He looked up. There, lying on the ground, was a woman. Her clothes were dusty, her face was wet with sweat. She was holding her stomach and she was pregnant. Julio dropped the spoon. His heart started beating fast. He stood up and rushed to the woman lying beside the dumpster. Her eyes were closed, her hands were shaking, her belly was big, very big. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. Madame, are you okay?" Julio asked, kneeling beside her. She didn't answer. Julio looked around. The market was still busy, just across the road, but nobody was looking. Nobody had seen her fall. Nobody cared. Julio held her hand. It was cold. He looked at the plate of rice in his hand, the only food he had. He looked at the woman again. Her lips were dry. Her stomach looked tight and heavy. The baby inside her was not moving. He made a decision. Julio brought the food close to her mouth. He tore a piece of the nylon and carefully fed her small bits of rice with his fingers. "Please eat, madame. Just a little. You need to eat," he said softly. The woman opened her eyes slowly. Tears rolled down the side of her face. She looked at Julio's face, dusty, tired, sweaty. She saw the food in his hand and the kindness in his eyes. Why are you helping me?" she whispered. Julio gave a small smile. "Because I know what hunger feels like. Nobody helped me yesterday." "But I don't want your baby to suffer," the woman cried. She ate more slowly, painfully. Julio helped her sit up and wiped her forehead with the edge of his shirt. She began to breathe better. Her body stopped shaking after a few minutes. She spoke again. "My name is Natasha." Julio nodded. "I'm Julio." She looked at him and smiled weakly. "Julio, you have a good heart. I didn't think anyone still cared." She reached into the small bag she was carrying and pulled out a folded card. It was bent, but clean. "Take this. It's my business card. One day, if you ever need help, find me." Julio took the card and looked at it. He couldn't read all the words, but he saw her name, Natasha. He helped her to her feet. She stood slowly, one hand holding her belly, the other holding his arm. "Thank you, Julio," she said, then walked slowly away into the street. Julio watched her until she disappeared into the crowd. He looked down at the empty plate. No food left. His stomach was still empty, but his heart felt full. "Maybe today I did something right," he whispered. He picked up his sack and walked back into the street, back to his life, back to hunger, back to survival. But this time, he had a card in his pocket and hope in his heart. Now look, before that day in the market, before Natasha lay weak beside the trash, she was someone else. She was once the wife of one of the richest men in the Abuja city. Her husband, Mr. Oena, was a powerful businessman. He owned buildings, cars, and companies. When they walked into a room, people stood. When they spoke, others listened. But money does not always bring peace. At first, their love was strong. They traveled, laughed, dreamed together, but slowly, everything began to change. Obina became too busy, too cold, too proud. And one day, Natasha discovered a truth that broke her completely. He had another woman, a secret family in another city. When she asked him, he didn't deny it. He simply said, "I am a man of many needs. If you don't like it, leave." Natasha's heart shattered. She had loved him with all she had. She had built her life around him. But now he treated her like she was nothing. She was already 2 months pregnant when she walked out of the mansion with just a handbag and her tears. No driver, no money, no protection. Her phone was switched off, her bank account was frozen. She had nothing but the baby growing inside her. Many years had passed. Julio was no longer a little boy. He was now a young man, but still living on the streets. He had grown taller, his face was sharper, but his life had not changed much. He still carried a sack, he still picked bottles and scrap metal. He still slept under the same bridge on cold nights. Some days were better. He found enough to buy bread and beans. Other days, his stomach stayed empty from morning until night. But Julio never became bitter. He still smiled at children. He still shared what little he had with street dogs. And deep in his pocket, he still kept an old, bent business card. The name Natasha was still written on it. He had never used it. He didn't even know if she was still alive. But somehow, that card gave him hope. One afternoon, the sun was hot. The streets were busy. Julio was crossing the road with his sack full of bottles. He'd seen more scrap metal across the road and wanted to collect it before others did. He looked left, he looked right. The road seemed clear. He stepped out carefully. Suddenly, a loud screech. A car came speeding from the corner. Before Julio could jump back, it hit him. People screamed. His sack flew into the air. Bottles shattered on the ground. Julio lay still on the hot tarmac, blood slowly spreading beside him. A crowd gathered. "He's not moving! Call the hospital! That's the bottle boy who walks around here!" A taxi rushed him to the nearest hospital, St. Grace Hospital. He was unconscious. His head was bleeding. His chest was not rising properly. Doctors came running, and then a nurse stepped into the room. She had soft eyes, calm hands, and a heart that once knew hunger. The moment she saw the patient's face, her breath stopped. She stepped closer, she looked again, and whispered in shock, "Julio." She turned to the doctor beside her. "Please, don't give him to anyone else. I'll take care of him personally." The other doctor nodded. She placed her hand gently on his chest. "You fed me when you had nothing. Now, I will fight to keep you alive." It was Natasha. Julio lay in the hospital bed unconscious with bandages on his head and chest. Machines beeped beside him. A drip was in his arm, his face looked tired but peaceful. Natasha sat by his side. She hadn't moved in hours. Her white nurse uniform was wrinkled, her eyes were red from crying, but her heart was strong. She held his hand, gently. "You don't know who I became, Julio," she whispered, "but you saved me that day behind the restaurant." I was ready to give up. She remembered everything, the food he gave, the words he spoke, the way he walked away with nothing left for himself. "You gave me your only meal, Julio, and now I'll give you a second chance at life." Days passed. Every morning, Natasha cleaned his wounds. She fed him through a tube. She spoke to him even when he didn't answer. She sat with him during the night. When other nurses went home, the doctors noticed her care. "He must be someone important to you," one doctor said. She smiled and replied, "He's not my brother. He's not my husband, but he's the reason I'm alive today." On the fifth morning, just as the sun began to rise, Natasha was wiping Julio's face with a wet cloth. Suddenly his fingers moved. She gasped. "Julio?" His eyes opened slowly. He blinked. He looked confused. Where am I?" he asked softly. Natasha's eyes filled with tears. She leaned closer and smiled. "You're safe now. You're in a hospital, and you're not alone." He looked at her. At first he didn't recognize her, but then something in her eyes sparked a memory. "You. I know you," he whispered. You were pregnant." "Behind the dumpster?" She nodded. "Yes, and you gave me food when I had nothing." "I never forgot you, Julio." Tears rolled down his face. For the first time in years, someone had cared for him. He tried to sit up, but she stopped him gently. "Don't move, just rest. I'll take care of everything." Julio closed his eyes again, not from pain, but from peace. That day, he didn't feel like a street boy. He felt human. Julio spent 2 more weeks in the hospital. Every day Natasha came to check on him. She brought him hot soup, clean clothes, and gentle smiles. Each time he opened his eyes, she was there, sitting by his bed with calm eyes and a soft voice. Julio was healing not just his body, but his heart. One morning, the doctor said, "Julio, you are now strong enough to leave." He sat on the hospital bed, unsure of what to say. "But where will I go?" he whispered. He looked down at his thin hands. He had no home, no family, no money, nothing. Natasha walked into the room with a small bag of food. She saw his face and smiled. "You don't have to worry," she said. "You're coming with me." Julio looked up confused. "To where?" "To my home," she replied. That evening, Natasha took him in a small taxi. They passed busy roads, tall buildings, and quiet neighborhoods. Finally, they reached a simple but clean apartment. There were flowers by the window, children played in the courtyard, everything looked peaceful. Julio stepped in slowly. He had never lived in a home like this. He looked around, neatly arranged chairs, a small dining table, and the smell of warm rice coming from the kitchen. Natasha smiled and said, "This is your home now too." Then a little girl ran out from the bedroom. She had big eyes, short curly hair, and a wide smile. "Mommy, who is that?" she asked, hiding behind Natasha. Natasha knelt down and pulled the girl close. "This is Julio," she said. "A long time ago, before you were born, Julio saved your life." The girl looked at him, then smiled shyly. "Thank you," she said softly, and hugged him. Julio's hands shook as he held the child. He looked at Natasha. This is the baby from that day." She nodded. "Yes, I named her Zuri. She means beautiful in Swahili. She is alive because of you." Julio could not speak. His eyes filled with tears. For the first time in years, he slept in a bed. That night, with a roof above him, with food in his stomach and love in the room. Weeks passed. Julio stayed with Natasha and little Zuri. Each day, he helped clean the house, wash dishes, and go to the market. He laughed again. He ate well. He even started learning how to read and write using Zuri's school books. Natasha saw his efforts and believed in him. One morning, she said, "Julio, I spoke to a friend. They run a recycling company. They can give you a job sorting bottles and scrap the right way." Julio couldn't believe it. "A real job?" he asked. She smiled. "Yes. And it starts next week." Tears rolled down his cheeks again, but this time they were happy tears. "Thank you, Natasha," he said. "You didn't just save my life, you gave me a reason to live." And so Julio now wakes up every morning with purpose. He wears a clean shirt, he goes to work, he eats with Natasha and Zuri at the same table, he no longer sleeps under bridges. He is no longer just the bottle boy, he is Julio, a young man with a future. Therefore, my dear viewers, sometimes the people who have nothing are the ones who give the most. And sometimes one small act of kindness can return like a miracle many years later. Don't look down on anyone. The person you help today may be the one to save your life tomorrow. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, comment below with your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to our channel for more true African stories that inspire and change lives. Thank you.